Honestly, I'm surprised by the results. Two political parties in Canada that each got more than 40% of the popular vote. I think the last time that happened was 1930. I would say Mark Carney. I was a little bit skeptical because he's not a politician by training, and I was actually really struck by how solid a campaigner he was. But for me, I think the most surprising thing, the fact that Pierre Poilievre was not reelected in Carleton is a little bit mind-blowing. Even for those of us who watch this kind of stuff, I think we were still a little bit dismissive. First thing I will say is I think it's a little bit too early to tell. Elections Canada will roll out some interesting stats over the next little while, but I'm super happy to see voter turnout. I think voter turnout was at 68%, so more than 2/3 of people who were eligible to cast a vote. There was also really strong turnout at advanced polls this year. I read a stat that said that more than 40% of people who voted in this election either did so in those advanced polls that were open up over that Easter long weekend, or by special ballot, which is a slightly different process, but it means votes that are collected not just on election day. One noticeable trend that I'll flag, which frankly did surprise me, is the Liberal performance. They won the popular vote this year over the Conservatives. That's something that they haven't been able to do for the last couple of elections. They won the popular vote and the most number of seats in 2015, lost the popular vote, but won the most number of seats in 2019 and 2021. So it was interesting to see that trend change as well. Obviously, for the Liberals, I think they're in a pretty good place. Yes, they came just shy of a majority, which would have been having 172 MPs elected, but 169 is still a really strong showing, especially if you think of what the projections were looking like just a couple of months ago. The Conservatives, I think, are also in a pretty decent place. They are forming official opposition. Most importantly, I think they made some really important gains in Ontario. However, their leader failed to win his own seat in Carleton, and I think that's going to present some challenges for them. I think the NDP has a really challenging road ahead. They had no MPs elected in Ontario. Their leader lost and resigned on election night, came in third in his own riding, and the NDP lost official party status. That means that you lose access to parliamentary funds that cover things like having a research bureau, that cover things like paying for staff salaries. And it's even things like money for your IT systems, right? These are really kind of the basics that a modern political party needs to succeed, and they won't have access to that. I would have loved to have seen more leaders' debates. Jury's out on whether or not that's a real game changer for individual voters. But it's something that I personally care about. I would have loved to have seen more debates. I think my biggest takeaway from election 2025 is that I'm glad it happened, right? This is a really important, consequential time for our country. So I'm really glad that we had an election, that people were given that opportunity to exercise their democratic rights. I'm almost getting choked up about it. Like that's how important this stuff is to me. And I'm really glad to see that for the most part, people seem to be accepting of those results. I think it's absolutely fair to say that change was on the ballot. Ultimately, more Canadians voted for a party who changed their leader rather than for a party that would have represented sort of a more wholesale change in government. I'm going to be looking at things like, what does cabinet look like? Will Prime Minister Carney continue with the Liberal tradition of there being gender parity? That'll be something we need to look out for. And then, of course, there are all of the other things like regional considerations, regional representation that need to be taken into account. I'm also going to be looking for what's the balance of old versus new, of veterans, of people who maybe were in cabinet or were backbenchers under Trudeau versus some of the new MPs who were elected this time around. And of course, and I say this as somebody who worked at finance and held the pen on a number of federal budgets, they got to do a budget. So I'll be looking at when that is and what it contains. And I'm going to be really curious to see sort of how the 2025 budget meets the moment in terms of some of the challenges that Prime Minister Carney laid out during the campaign.